Hey guys, welcome back to the Confused Gentleman podcast. Thank you for listening in to us. Today we have Kip, WD, and myself, Christian. Today we're going to be talking about something that growing up, a lot of people thought was rude to talk about, and also thought it was very controversial, and that's religion. So today we're going to talk about, I guess, just how religion is in our day-to-day life and the importance or unimportance it plays in our lifestyles, but also in our families. So who wants to start us off? Kip?
Yeah, I'll give a little bit of background. In today's time, I am not a practicing religious person. It doesn't have a big hold in my life, and there's a lot of things I find confusing about it, and I don't understand it. And that switch really happened, kind of went to college, because I went to a Catholic private school till 8th grade, church multiple times a week in school, then every day on Sunday. My parents went to church. My grandparents went to church. It was a family thing. And it got to a point where I was going just to go because I felt like I had to, not because I wanted to. And then when I went to college, I lived on my own. I had no one to, monitor me or make me feel bad for not going or anything like that. I just stopped. And the more I have advanced here in life, it hasn't changed a role at all for me. Religion doesn't have any factor to it. But what I find interesting is I think there are some lessons from different religions that we can be applied to today that I think we have lost as a society. So I think there's a balance between the values and the teachings that a religion holds versus the actual religion itself. So, I'm curious to see where this conversation takes us.
Yeah, and I like that. And a lot of times you see that disconnect at that college age I've seen, where, families are making us go. I remember my dad used to force me to go, and if I ever tried to fall asleep, he'd just hit me in the back of the head in front of everybody, and then everybody knew I was trying to sleep, right? So I think that happens to a lot of us growing up. Our parents kind of make us go to whatever religious group they go to, right? And then, slowly when you get to college, then you got to make that decision. Is it for me or not? Because like you said, Kip, no one's waking you up to go to mass, right? Like I could sleep in and kick it, or I can go. And I think that happens to everybody. Everybody has that one moment of transition there. WD, what do you think? What's your background here?
Yeah, it's similar to Kip and probably yours, Christian. We went about 3 times a week. Twice on Sunday, once Wednesday night. Very, very religious household. No alcohol, anything like that. Growing up, attended youth summer camps, Christian summer camps, and all. And it was instilled in me to to trust God, to, if I have questions or if there's something going on, to seek his guidance, whether it be prayer or going to talk to the preacher. But like Kip, when I went to college, it kind of took a back burner. I don't know if it was because of, me being from such a small town, not a lot to do in that town besides just hang out with your core group of friends. But going to college is like, oh man, there's a whole new world out there that I had never had experienced. And it's like, church can wait. I can go out and hang out with these new people I just met, see what they're all about. They're into sports, they're into this and that, and that's what interests me. So yeah, I'm going to follow that. Is that a bad thing? I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to grow up that way, religious, and then kind of fall back, but you can gain it back. I don't want to say we're not practicing, church goers. I mean, we have all intentions to go. We have been to church as a family and all that. And I mean, my youngest daughter right now is going to pre-K at a Baptist church. So we know that that God, Jesus, religion does play a big role in the family life as well. And that's what we try to adhere to, but it's really hard in this day and age because it's not promoted, it's not. And it's totally different. I don't know if it's just my mindset or what, because I felt like back when I was growing up, that's all I knew was you go to church, you listen to the preacher.
To clear it up, what denomination are you guys? What'd you grow up as?
Non-denominational.
Same, Church of Christ, non-denominational. Yeah.
That's interesting. I said I grew up. I grew up Catholic.
Yeah, so
my wife grew up Lutheran, so Christianity is obviously bigger up here. I mean, non-denominational really wasn't big in my area. Maybe a decade ago, you start seeing some of those non-denominational churches come up. But
they kind of branch out from down here. It's the Baptists and the Methodists. That's your big guys. And the Baptists are, from what I know, is it's no alcohol, none of that. But you may see them at the bar on Saturday night, but when it comes to Sunday, it's none of that. So it's a little different.
So when you're saying with your daughter in pre-K and about God and Jesus,
yes,
this is where I have the biggest disconnect. Are you talking? You want her to know of this spiritual higher being, the higher purpose, or are you just looking more at the teachings of what a Judeo-Christian kind of lifestyle has to offer? Because I think the two can be separated without having a higher power that people pray to or acknowledge.
I think that we are choosing to send her to a school, and my oldest went to a Christian school as well for pre-K. But we chose that route because both of us, my wife and I, grew up that way. My wife, she went to Catholic school her high school career. So she knows, faith-based teachings and what that instills in you. It instills in you these morals, these values that have transcended throughout, me growing up to who I am today. I may not always, act the best or maybe not even seem like I have the best morals in certain situations and all, but I know that those were instilled in me at a young age that I can fall back on. It's like, okay, I know that being kind to someone is the right thing to do, even though I may want to hit them upside the head or do something, but I know that being kind to someone makes you a better person. And I think that
this is where I get screwed around, because you don't need a religion to teach you that.
You don't need a religion to teach you that, but I feel like it's a place where people can congregate of all of one like mind, and it's easier to teach people that way. That's just my thought.
Yeah, and I think I'm on the completely other spectrum when it comes to church and stuff like that. Like when I grew up, I say I was non-denominational. I grew up going to a Baptist church. The initial church I went to, and then probably about middle school, I started going to the non-denominational church down the road. So I think church and having that community is huge. I understand what you're saying, Kip, that you don't necessarily need that religion to teach those lessons. Like you can teach those, teach be kind. Like you don't need to say Jesus, because Jesus said so. You need to be kind. I understand.
Well, you don't need to say you're kind because you're scared of a God.
Yeah.
I mean, it's my observation that a lot of people go to church in fear of the heaven and hell relationship. If I don't pray to this God, if I don't do this, I'll go to hell, and I don't want to do that. And I think all religions kind of instill that compliance nature, that you have to do what I say or you're not going to be the fruits of our labor. Right. And it's across the board. I mean, you can look at the Muslim and Islam, and, you kill yourself and get 72 virgins or 27 virgins or whatever it is. I mean,
if you're a martyr,
right. I mean, so it's all these false promises that I see versus logical and rational thought and just being of a good person.
But how do you Kip, know that it's a false promise? I'm not talking about the 72 versions but I'm talking about in religion in general. Like if Christianity, we believe that there's a higher power. That's what's instilled in us. That's what we believe. How do you know that once you leave this earth, you're not going to either paradise or you're going to, hell? Like, how do you know that's not true?
There's two ways to go about it. The first could be, biology and science of a human person and how we are as a species. And when you observe death and you see decay, the matter just goes away. The body disintegrates and you're just there. So that could take the one approach, a more scientific approach, or the other one would be there is a certain level and there's a difference between having faith and then knowing what is logical and rational. You can rationally and logically say there's no proof of a God, there's no proof of a heaven, therefore it doesn't exist. But if you cross into that parallel of faith, I can't argue with anybody on that. Right? So if your faith is you believe there's a heaven and hell, that's great. But if you are basing life decisions around that, to me, that's an irrational thought. Right? Or as a collective, as a group. I mean, Christianity is one of the oldest religions out there. And for 2,000 years, for the New Testament, it's, the Ten Commandments and Jesus and died on the cross and you have God and Mary and Joseph, and you got all the stories that come along with it. And it's known that the Catholic Church was huge back in the day, in the 1500s, 1400s, and they held a lot of power over the populace. So to suggest that the Catholic Church, using them specifically, is all holy is wrong, right? And there's evidence. So when you start taking apart pieces of the puzzle, it makes you question a little bit more.
And I see that.
So
and this is my thing. So I'm kind of opposite of y'all. When I grew up going to church, and when I got to high school, I was like the youth kid leader, and I felt like I was like the man, everybody likes me. I went to all the youth retreats, youth camps like Dubs did, right? Did it all. But when I got to college, I actually realized that what I believed and what I knew was two totally different things. So I believed that, what I do and how I do things is what's going to get me to heaven, right? So I'm going to go to camp. And me being a good person is going to get me to heaven, right? But I didn't actually truly know that. And there was a gentleman at my college that sat down with me and shared the actual gospel with me, and sharing me the good news of that. What ended up happening is instead of me not going to church, I started figuring out, well, I probably should go to church, right? Probably should start learning about this because I thought I knew and I thought I was a believer, but I actually come to find out I wasn't really sold, right? And I was actually agnostic growing up to a certain point because my mom had cancer and I had a huge battle with God about if my mom was a huge believer in God, went to church. She brought me to church every single Sunday, even when I wanted to fall asleep and my dad hit me in the head, right? But I didn't understand why this bad thing was happening to my mother. And that really pushed me away from God. I believe that there was a God, but I didn't want anything to do with him, right? That's why I was agnostic at that point. But coming back around, I learned a lot in college that what you're talking about, Kip, I had those same discussions with myself. So it's actually pretty funny hearing you talk about that. Because literally, I could probably go get a journal from my little library behind here that actually asks those same questions. And I think that's very interesting in the sense that I used to be a youth minister, right? I've been overseas So on the outside, I probably look like what you want every Christian to look like. But I struggle too, right? There's a lot of things in my life. I'm the most impatient person you probably will ever meet. I'm very prideful a lot. And there's a lot of things I struggle with. Well, what I will say is, works will not get you to that paradise, regardless of what you do, right? Like, and that's what I believe is that I think a lot of people have used Jesus's works to gain for themselves. Does that make sense? And then what ends up happening is, like you said, Kip, you have people in power who are using the church to say, this is why I'm in power. I'm holy, right? I'm set apart. But in all honesty, they're just sinners, right? I mean, at the end of the day,
right.
Like you're not special.
Most religious people are the most hypocritical people on earth. I could go to a church on Sunday. Mm-hmm. We all leave after an hour of singing and saying hymns and everything. You could have a homeless man out the front door and no one would give him a dime, but they just gave $20 to the church inside.
Exactly.
So that bothers me to a point of who is the better person, that 2,000 people in the church or some stranger who just gave that guy $5 outside.
And this is where you'll hear me talk a lot. It's a hard issue, right? Because I can act and I can do things regardless of how I feel about it, right? Like I could hate that person and still give them $5, or I could love them and not, right? Either way, you're going to view that action, not my feeling, correct? And I think hypocrisy is always going to be in the church. Hypocrisy is always going to be there because you have a lot of flawed people trying to be unflawed, right? Just simplifying it. Everybody's trying to get better. And honestly, I say everybody, probably not everybody. There's a lot of nominal Christians out there who are just going through the motions, who are just going to church because like we said, it's because it's what we did, right? What's your schedule? I wake up every Sunday and go see the same people, shake the same hands, go to the same restaurant, and that's how I start my week. Right.
But doesn't it usually create an environment to allow yourself to, if you have a family, to grow those kids in an environment that is safe, that is teaching them the morals? And I know, Kip, you said that it doesn't take a religion to teach someone to be a good person. You know, you can either have within yourself, you could grow up terribly, but turn out to be a good person. Just because you have that already instilled in you. Or maybe you have somebody you met one time that said a certain thing that you're like, okay, I can be that good person. But I believe that there's an environment that's created that allows for all this craziness that's in society right now to not infiltrate that. And you can raise your kids in a way that you feel like is the best.
One of the
for them
bigger benefits of church is a sense of community, which is lost. So if you do fall on hard times,
right,
you are struggling, you have a community to fall back on for help. And that, when I said in the beginning about Judeo-Christian values, and I think that's one of them that could be applied, right, having that community outside of your family unit, outside of your neighborhood, to a more of a town and local center, it's more advantageous for you as a person, as a family, to have more people to fall back on if needed. I also wonder if this is a difference of growing up in a small town versus me. You know, the city I grew up in, I'm not going to say it was a small city, but I've been to your hometown, WD. Mine's like New York City compared to where you were at. But my church was rather large. It's one of the bigger churches in the archdiocese where we're at. And I think on any given Sunday, you could have a couple thousand people in church. I mean, it's a big church,
right,
but you don't know everybody there. You're not shaking hands with everybody. You kind of see the same familiar faces. They sit in the same pew at the same time. And being completely honest, why I enjoyed going to church were two reasons. I did get to see my grandparents or other family members that show up.
Mm-hmm.
We would tend to always go out to breakfast afterwards, and that was always nice. The other one is, I will say, the priest that we had in church gave excellent homilies, and he could take a reading that he just had and blend it together to make a very actionable speech for everyone to learn from. I get lost and I get I don't care about the books and the gospels and the readings. I think that's all garbage, right? I'll take, give me 10, 15 minutes of the priest talking over anything else. And I think more people
But isn't the priest looking through the Bible to give his the word, if you will, to preach to you? So aren't you technically, learning verses, learning stories indirectly?
Yes and no. How many times can you tell the story of Moses parting the Red Sea and make it relevant? Mm-hmm. Or how do you make it relevant? I mean, I think the only story you get, I see you shaking your head, Christian. I'm looking forward to it. So, but okay, how it goes. Moses, he had a staff. He separated the sea. Everyone walked through. The moral of that story is fight for what you think is right and help the people that are suffering and take care of, the bad guys. Do I really think someone parted the sea? No.
And that's fair. And that's fair. and I think the big thing is here, what we're talking about here is when you're talking about the Bible, I understand. So I used to go around, be a missionary and talk to people and even attempt to convert them. That was my whole thing as being a missionary, was to share Jesus and to teach him. And I actually, I did not knock. No, I wasn't a knocker. I went to beaches and shared Jesus, and I went to Southeast Asia and shared Jesus. I didn't go to neighborhood and start knocking and had my little white, white shirt, black tie or whatever. But what I'm trying to say is, your argument and you not believing the Bible is not something I've never heard of. That's actually very common for a lot of people who don't believe religion's important. Is because obviously Christianity is built around a text and also a God, but a lot of times how we define that God is through that text.
True.
So if you don't believe in the text, it's very hard for you to believe in that God, if that makes sense. Because if I'm going to keep saying, Kip, well, if you look in Romans, 3, and you're like, dude, I don't care what that says. No, but Kip, if I keep going back to a book that you don't believe, I'm going to lose that battle, right? And going back to talking about sermons and stuff, I think if you truly know the word, it is not your job to make it relevant to the people today. It's your job to make sure that God's teachings touch those people. Now, this is the thing. When we're teaching about Jesus, do we want it to be somewhat entertaining? Yes, because you don't want the 13-year-old kid like me be sleeping and saying, hey man, I think you should pay attention to this, right? Mm-hmm. But in the same token, there's a lot of churches who have taken entertainment value more important than what Jesus is actually saying. And there's a lot of people who have done the opposite. But the thing is, God, if you believe in God, there has to be some, reverence for the text. And that's the big thing. But when we're talking about people who don't believe in the book, how would you talk, right? And I think the big thing is, ultimately, if heaven and hell is real, what?
You talk by eliminating all the personnel in the book. You don't talk about Mary and Joseph, or even Jesus. You take what happened and you try and use that in a modern day situation to understand the value that it's trying to teach. I think we are both, all three of us, are agreeing that Judeo-Christian values are important for society to grow. I think those same values are what's being lost by a lot of people in today. But I don't think it's because it's a lack of people going to church.
And I would agree.
If there's so much problems that I see with the Catholic Church specifically, that how anyone could still be a practicing Catholic boggles me and concerns me. And that goes beyond just the teachings that you're seeing. You hear about the stories of the pedophile priests. You hear the stories of the possible cover-ups. You know the history of the church had. You know at the one point they're anti-science way back in the day. I mean, I can go down the line and say how, and make a case of why the Catholic Church is not good. Doesn't mean the values aren't good. Doesn't mean
this is the thing, Kip. What most confuses you about church?
I don't think I'm confused about church. I know why people go to church.
But what aspect of either Catholicism or just Christianity or just church in general, what makes you not want to go and wake up and go to church? Is that the hypocrisy? Is that the biggest thing? Or
that's a big component.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see the importance of going to a building,
right,
to church.
Right.
You don't need to hear the same stuff. And if you do go every weekend, it's a revolving calendar. So you're going to get the same teachings at, the first Advent, the second Advent, third Advent, for Easter, Christmas. It's all going to be the same stories. Genesis, this, that, the other. And I mean, I wonder if church could do better if they took more obscure teachings and readings and tried to bring them to light. Right? I wonder if you could do something like that to maybe bring in the younger crowd and kind of teach them as if they were going into priesthood. Right? My religion classes in school, again, you learn the main stories and that's about it. Taking the next step further. And I also think teaching the history of the church is very vital for people to understand and know. And that, again, that goes across all religion bases of how was the church founded? Why was it founded? What does their history look like? You can make a case that some of the major practicing religions are no different than some of the small cults that are formed in Texas. You got a guy that thinks he's the Messiah. He gets a group of people to follow them. They pray to him. Next thing you know, they're all drinking the Kool-Aid or they're on the floor dead. I mean, it's no different except the Catholic Church has got millions and millions, if not billions, of people across the planet to follow them. They got a ton of cash.
You can't encompass the whole religion of Catholicism as one that is, why would you practice that religion, right? Because each church is different, or diocese, whatever you want to call it, they're different. Like you said, you liked your pastor or your priest, right? You thought he taught the word well. I assume you thought you could learn from him if you still went there, right? Would you go that far?
Okay.
So you can't. I feel like you just can't just encompass the entire religion and I understand the pedophilia. Like speaking of Catholicism, specifically, but I understand that you get a bad rep to a certain degree. But you got devout Christians, devout Catholics, devout Lutherans that they teach what they've learned.
Okay. Well, let's take it outside of just going to actual church. Okay. You got a bunch of I know, Christian, you're involved in a Bible study or a men's group. Okay. Mm-hmm. Or you have the people that either, that pray at home, which I'm not going to fault anybody to do it. When you start taking certain practices, let me start over. I think the more hardcore religious people are the ones doing things outside of the church.
Right.
The Bible studies, the men's groups, the youth pastorship, the mentorship, the praying at home, reading the Bible, saying grace, doing all that stuff. That's got to be less than 10% of the people. And like I said, how many people are like me that went to church because their parents went to church?
100%.
Right.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
I find a lot of religious leaders are frauds.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they do a lot. They do good for a lot of people, but they do a lot of bad as well.
Mm-hmm.
And they get lost by power and greed and fame and fortune. And they emotionally manipulate people into what they want. And I think that's one of my bigger problems with religion is I can see the emotional manipulation and the fear tactics used to get them for compliance. And I think that could be the baseline of my thoughts and my feelings towards it.
And that's fair. And I think, hypocrisy is a huge thing in almost every single organization, especially religion. And I agree with you. I think if people would stop treating church as a building and start treating it like an actual body of Christ is what the actual church is, we would be a lot better off. During COVID-19, people, the church buildings were shut down.
Which is a mistake, right? In the first part.
Like, and a lot of people.
Political debate versus religious debate.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we can talk about that later. But what I'm saying is a lot of I very much saw as a practicing devout Christian who was actually serious about Jesus, who was serious about Christ, who was actually home doing the things they needed to do, which honestly, I had to get in the hang of it, right? I didn't start reading my Bible. Like, we can't go to church, reading the Bible that day, right? Like, I had to get into that setting, into that, what's the word? Routine. Mindset, right. But the thing is, everybody that was ranting and raving about churches being closed is the same people who either don't go, or the nominal Christians who go simply out of their routine. A lot of people were complaining about churches being closed because it made them uncomfortable or got them out of their routine. And I think there was a huge number of people who weren't complaining because they weren't getting taught Jesus, because most people were having their churches online. Can we agree with that? We saw a lot of people doing, instead of going into the building, there was a lot of people doing online. If people were very upset about not being taught Christ, then there was multiple avenues online to be taught that daily, if not weekly, on their Sunday routine. And I think a lot of people, especially nowadays, treat church, which should be the body of Christ, which should be the people, the actual members of church. If they started treating that like the actual church and put importance on that, then the building wouldn't be what it is, right? And I think the mindset is that a lot of people, a lot of Christians nowadays are so caught up with trying to look good and look like the right Christian and look like the right person and have the right perception, and they're not putting the importance on actually following Christ. Because if you follow, go, Dubs.
Oh, go ahead.
No,
sorry.
You go.
I was just going to throw in a little tidbit. It's funny that you say that, because I can specifically remember growing up in church, certain, Sundays, they would preach that exact same thing you just said. Even back then, It was, you're trying to make yourself look like the model Christian. That's what you're trying. You're being hypocritical or whatever you want to call it. But I mean, I just want to throw that in there because that just reminds me of, a sermon I heard one time.
Right. And this is the thing, Kip, and I think everybody needs to hear this. Christians are not perfect. And if any Christian says they're perfect, they're a liar. I'm just going to say that. And my thing is,
they better get to that confession booth.
And the thing with confession, we can get that, and that could be a whole nother podcast, how I feel about Catholicism and all of that. Or we could talk about it now. It's up to you. But I just think in the sense, what happens is a lot of people need organizational or organized church in a building for their relationship with Christ. And I don't think, if I had a relationship with my wife and I said, hey, I'm only your husband when I enter the house, that would not be a long, good marriage. Well, like if I was like, hey, babe, the moment I'm out here, I'm single. But when I come home, I'm your husband. But you gotta think there's a lot of Christians out there who go to church and say, hey, God, I'm yours for the next hour and a half. But then when I go to Applebee's after this, then I'm not, right? And I'm single and I'm ready to mingle with whatever the world's going to give me. And that happens. And I'm not saying I haven't done it. I most definitely have. And I'm not saying I haven't done it recently, because I most definitely have. I'm a sinner and I'm not perfect. But the big thing is, a lot of people think it's okay to say, for the 1 hour of church, mass, religious meeting, whatever that is, that's when I'm serious about my God. Whatever that God is, that's when I'm serious about them. And then for the next however many days, however many hours, I'm about me, right? And it's all about me. It's all about who I am. And then, and that's the crazy thing is, people go to church and they're like, oh no, straighten up their tie, fix up their dress. I look good. I'm going to talk to the right people. I'm going to say the right things. I'm going to serve in the right way so I get seen. And then when I leave church, they're all going to think I'm good. But then you're going to go home and judge people. You're going to go home and cuss a lot of people out. You're going to go home and, look at pornography. You're going to go home and look at all these different things, and you're going to sin and then not change a single thing. But going back to the relationship marriage thing, the problem is a lot of people want Christianity to be a religion and not a relationship. Like, they want the religion, they want to have the routine, they want to feel like they're good and, hey, Jesus loves me. But literally, Jesus tells us multiple times that we're going to suffer, that we're not going to be popular, that we're going to be hated. And that's when that relationship comes in. Like, everybody wants to be liked, right? How many times, there's not a dislike button on Facebook, right? Like, everybody's like, probably there should be, but everybody wants likes, everybody wants views and all that. And I guess that's kind of counterintuitive because we want likes and views and subs as well here for the podcast. But what I'm saying is we have a very selfish society now, that instead of people loving Jesus and actually trying to cultivate a relationship with him, they just want the religion. They want the stamp of approval from a church. Hey, I go to church, I'm good. But really, like you said, Kip, there's a percentage, and too low of a percentage, who people actually go home and read their Bible, right? Go home and pray. Go home and go to Bible studies. And again, you don't have to do those things to be a Christian and to love God. But you should want to talk about Jesus more than an hour if you love God. You should want to love him, spend your time with him. And I think that's what cultivates that community. Because there's a lot of people as young adults as we are that I've met, and we've met outside of church, and I felt more at home with them than I have sometimes at my own church. Does that make sense? And it's because they're actually doing the things that we're talking about in church, right? Hey, we need you to go read. We need you to go share. We need you to go serve. And we go out and do those things versus we're just a community sitting in this building and listening.
Well, isn't there a mindset though of I can sin, be a sinner all day long, but before I die, as long as I ask for forgiveness, I will go straight to heaven. Isn't that not in the scripture? Is that not preached? Yes. So I feel like there's a mindset of that as well. Is like, man, I can do whatever the hell I want. Mm-hmm. Obviously we don't know when we're leaving this earth. We don't know that. So you are gambling a little bit if you're not practicing daily. Right. But if you have that mindset, which I think a lot of people do, and maybe people who grew up in church, having their parents take them to church, multiple times a week. And then growing up, again to college, they see the world differently. They're like, oh, well, I'll just ask for forgiveness. I'll get old, make sure I get right with the Lord. I can party. I can do whatever I want.
You say that, does. When I did college ministry for the 5 years, yes, I was in college for 5 years, took a victory lap, don't judge me. But for the 5 years of college, when I did ministry, there were so many people that I talked to. I was just like, hey, man, do you want to go to church with me? Like, it was just a simple question. Right. Do you want to go to church with me? Man, I'm a get right with God after college. Right, exactly. I'm a go talk about, I'm going to go to church when I get out of college. Like, it was always like, when I get out of this season of life, then I'm going to start getting right with God. And a lot of times we see that even after that, right? Oh, when I get a kid, I'm going to start going to church so I can take my kid or whatever that looks like. That's not where you should be. And I'm not saying like, hey, when you repent on your deathbed, like you don't go to heaven, like check. That's not my decision. I don't make those, eternal decisions. Like if you give your life to Christ, that's fine. But what I am saying is that hypocrisy comes from people who just want a sticker that says I'm a Christian or just wants the title that says I'm a Christian. And it's not the people who are actually practicing a relationship with Jesus, right? And the people who practice a relationship with Jesus are still hypocrites. But what I'm saying is you actually, like me, I'll straight up tell you, I'm a hypocrite and I'm an idiot sometimes. And I say things and I don't do them and I do things I said I wouldn't do. But I'm doing my best daily to get right with Jesus, to learn more about him and to become better.
Okay, I'm going to propose this question.
Propose it. I love it. I love it.
Is Jesus a person or an idea?
In what way do you mean idea? You got to define idea for me.
Is the idea of Jesus those Christian values? Or are you praying to Jesus who you think was a real person?
Jesus was a person, and
Prove it.
Prove it? Well, if I had my paper on Jesus in history right now, I could let you read my 26-page paper on it. If you would like me to tell you about Zoroastrian astrologers that talked about them, but
let me rephrase. I really think there was a person named Jesus. I really believe there was a Mary and a Joseph. I believe there was a Pontius Pilate, and I do believe Jesus died on a cross.
Right.
How that ties into religion is where I have the big problem.
And that's fine. And this is the thing.
So I think Jesus is used as a set of ideas that we should be striving for to be better. Not to have a relationship with a person who he died for our sins and he was this good person and he converted and the body and blood of Christ and his dad was God. That rings no at all with me. That serves no purpose with me. And to bring an example, we just had Kai baptized a month ago, and he's over 2. That never happens. Like you do that within the first 6 months. Okay. There was nothing special of that day for me. There was nothing special. It made no sense that dribbling water on his forehead is now he's now saved.
Right. And again, I felt I did
that day. Yeah. That day to me was just a formality for the extended family because they wanted it more than we did. Again, I think we're saying a lot of the same stuff where we want the same things, holding the value and the ethics and those core values of being a good person. You lose me when you start bringing in personnel and people. Adam and Eve, and you can go through the list, right? I think one of the most believable stories in the gospel is David and Goliath.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
right? I don't think Moses is hard to prove. You're telling me Noah had a boat, it had 2 animals on it.
Yeah,
across the world. I got a lot of questions,
and that's fine. And this is the thing, Kip. It is okay to question. And don't let anybody tell you that it's not okay to question. When it comes to religion, if you're not asking questions, then you're not practicing well. Because this is the thing. I ask questions every day of Jesus. Every day. Every day I have to ask a question. And it's not like, oh, Jesus, thank you for waking me up. What's on today's itinerary, right? No, it's like, hey, man, like I'm struggling with X, Y, and Z. And I need you to help me figure this one out, right? Or I have this opportunity in my life and it's hard for me to figure it out. I think the thing with that is, so Jesus was a person, all those people lived, historical documents, even. So I had to write a paper in college and it was a history and religion class. And I had to prove that Jesus was historically alive without using any biblical text. So I couldn't mention a Bible, any biblical scholars, none of that. And I had to write a paper, and there's a lot of different there's a lot of Roman scholars that talk about Jesus, a lot of Zoroastrian people that talk about Jesus. There's a whole lot of people that talk about him. And in history, there's only 3 accounts that need to happen for it to be historically accurate. Does that make sense? So if I was to spill something and us 3 saw it, then historically I could write down somewhere I spilt my drink during the podcast, right? And then if y'all signed off on it, then there it is. And I did that. Now, when you get into religion, I understand. I can't teleport us back there and say like, hey, God, Jesus, I need you to show me a miracle right now. I need Moses to part these seas,
right? Like
so I can prove to Kip that this happened, right? Yeah. I can't do that. And that's where the big word faith comes from. And it's tough. It's a very hard question and it's a very difficult answer. And it's something that you'll never have the full answer to ever. And that's where belief and faith comes from. But I think at the end of the day, like we're talking about, and we can discuss this further, what Jesus did for us as we believe in Christians is that he died for us and he rose again in 3 days and he bore our sins and now we're saved. And talking about baptism, there's a huge discussion on, should I sprinkle water? Should I be fully immersed? Do you even need baptism? Right? There's a lot of discussion on that we can get into. But at the end of the day, I think if you find someone who's a true follower of Christ, they will actively be searching out to have all the qualities you need to be a godly person. And that goes in with the kindness, patience, all that. But I do agree with you, Kip, in saying that you do not have to be a Christian to have patience, to have kindness. But I will say, to Dub's point, if you get a room full of people who believe that those are valued things, and that you truly see them as people who are seeking after the same values as we are, I think at the end of the day, that's a community you'd want to raise your kids in.
I agree. That makes perfect sense to me. You don't need God in it, though. You don't need the religion. You don't need that aspect of it. You need to teach the characteristics and the core values, not the umbrella that it falls under.
And you don't need God to be a good person. I agree. You don't. Like, at no point, I have met atheists that are a lot better people than people I went to Bible study with. I have. You do not need God to be a good person. Well, what you need God is, Jesus says, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No one can get to the Father except through me. So where God comes into this is, at the end of the day, do you believe there's a heaven and a hell? And if you believe that, how do you plan to get to heaven?
So you could take all those values and have those core values and say there is no heaven and hell. Do you think there's a discrepancy there?
With what? What's the discrepancy?
If I were to tell you right now, I don't think there's heaven and hell. I think when we're dead, we're dead. That's the end of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That doesn't make the core values any less different.
No, it doesn't.
That shows you don't need the religion and the God. You don't need that higher level to complete the goal.
To do good. But the thing is, so if God is your point of morality, right? And if you're saying what I say is, what Jesus is the example we all should follow. If I believe that, and then that's where my morality comes from, correct? So if you don't believe that there's a God, I can't, we can have that argument till the cows come home. But what we can do is, we're talking about there's not God, there is God. I think morality in the aspect, and we can get into morality more later on. But if you don't get your morality from a religion, for there to be good and evil, you have to tell me where you get that from.
Okay. So if I tell you I believe in the spaghetti monster, is that the same thing? Or what about the Church of Scientology? Or the Islams? I mean, do you think their morals are any different than ours? From a Christian standpoint, yes, but they believe blowing up themselves gets them into heaven.
Right.
Is that morally correct? No. So that further proves that religion can lead to more corrupt people and more disconnect and more confusion.
And this is the thing. Practitioners are sinful at the end of the day, but the teachings aren't. The teachings in themselves.
Well, what makes one teaching more important than the other across religions? Religions just further divide people instead of bringing people together. And at this point in time, in today's time, you got a lot of Christians hiding from a lot of countries because of persecution. You have other things going on. So if all I see is religion greatly dividing the world as a whole, we're fortunate enough to live in this country where we have the religious freedoms. You can do what you want to do without persecution. That's not like that across the world.
Oh, I agree.
So in my view and in my opinion, religion causes more problems than they create.
And that's a fair point.
To close it out, it's very simple. We need to have Judeo-Christian values. We need to have good morals, good ethics, and we need to teach those on from generation to generation. We got to build a community around each other that we can grow from a small bowl into going to a big bowl. You don't need a higher power to fill the bowl. You don't need them to be your compass. You don't need them. You do bring up the interesting point of like where's your morality needle pointing to, and where isn't it? So that's an interesting topic. And that's an interesting observation. I just still think religion causes more problems than they give.
Hey, and my thing during this discussion, this is us just talking it out, and at no point are we trying to change each other's mind. We're just trying to talk it out. And I appreciate, like I said on the previous podcast, I play devil's advocate with myself 24/7. So everything we discussed today, I've probably talked about it multiple times in my head. So I appreciate that I can talk to y'all and not to myself. And that's fantastic.
There you go.
Because I talk to myself too much. But yeah, guys, and I think it's good because at the end of the day, as gentlemen, we have to set a standard for our kids. At the end of the day, we have to build a community that our kids can be safe in a community that we value and have the same values that we have. And I think that's the big thing that we're getting at is all of us agree there are certain things we want all our kids to know, and there's certain ways we want all our kids to act. Correct?
Right.
Yeah.
And I think at the end of the day, it's our job as gentlemen to go out, to set that standard and expectations ourselves, and to build that bowl, as you said, Kip, and to build that community so the next generation's community can be even bigger and even more stable, so those values aren't lost.
That's a good point. What's your closing thoughts here on Dubs? And then I got a question that we can end on.
No, I think the discussion you guys, y'all mainly had it. I'm not on this. I'm kind of in the middle, if you will, between you guys. I would say I'm not all the way, fully devoted like Christian, but not all the way, like just I don't believe in the church or anything. Not saying that people might not believe in the church as a whole, but you know what I'm getting at. I think I'm kind of in the middle, so I was more interested to see what your guys' views are on this, just because I was interested. My opinion on it is that I think, like I said earlier, the church creates a sense of community that you can grow up a family in, that you all have the same morals, values, whether it be Islamic, whether it be Christianity, Catholicism, whatever. You're still in a community that you think is right for you and your family to grow up in.
Good end there. So here's my question. Give me a yes or no, and then we'll jump out of here. Do you think future generations can survive and be civilized without any religion? Dumb?
I think they need something or someone to strive to get to or to believe in. I think we as a human race, that's what we innately, that's what we are. We need something to strive for. We need a goal, whether that be a certain set of values if you want to go Kip's route, or you want to go to an actual person, Christian's route. You got to have that goal.
That was a long-winded yes or no answer, but okay.
I'm sorry.
I was going to say, I said no. I could have gave an explanation as well, but Dubs is over here like,
so you need to talk a lot, so I got to get a little.
My bad.
So, all right, yeah, let's get your dub nugget.
No, I didn't. But let me throw in one little dub nugget here. These will be on every podcast. It's a little random fact to kind of not necessarily sum up anything, because this could be random, whatever you want it to be. So I thought this was pretty interesting. So y'all like figs?
Yeah,
figs. Pretty good.
Yeah,
I like them in fig Newtons. Give me a fig Newton all day. No, but the actual fig, did you know that it's not considered vegan?
What?
No, I did not know that.
No, I did not know that.
Yeah, you want to know why? And this is really, really interesting. The female wasp will actually go into a fig to attempt to lay her eggs, but ends up, she eventually dies. She gets stuck in there, and the enzymes, the protein digesting enzymes within the fig will actually digest her body inside the fig. So enjoy your wasp infested figs. You're welcome.
Nice.
All right, send us out, Christian.
Love that. And on that beautiful note, all right, hey guys, I appreciate y'all listening to our podcast, To the Confused Gentleman. If you liked what you heard, go ahead and like and subscribe. Hit that bell for more notifications, guys. Just let us know what you think. Comment down below, and we look forward to seeing y'all next time, guys.